bro.
Our ears forever hear things distasteful to them. Our mind is forever filled with events contrary to our desires. But such situations are exactly the whetstones for advancing our virtue, for putting our discipline into practice. If we always heard words pleasing to our ears, living this life would be just like being buried alive in poison. The whetstone. I like that imagery, that metaphor. To remain sharp requires sharpening. A stone or something hard with a medium. Repetition, friction, pressure. It can hone us in onto things, onto ourselves, onto our non-selves. Maybe that's what I've been doing. Maybe that's what life is. An enormous whetstone. Slowly grinding away the edges until it leaves us with nothing but a razor's edge. That sounds a little depressing. So maybe it's not that. Maybe we aren't the tool being sharpened. Maybe we're the whetstone. No, that doesn't sound right either. The whetstone. It's been a bit of a weird week. I've been dealing with some technical issues with regards to my disability medical devices. They've been, they've been leaking. From what I can tell, manufacturer problems. And it's led me to not really want to leave the house for any extended period of time. I'm hoping it's just the batch that I got recently and not some sort of larger issue that will require more considerations. But it has meant that I haven't gone to the shop. Gone a little stir crazy, but if you know me, that's nothing new. A few days, slightly cooped up, keeping a vigilant eye over your medical needs isn't uncommon for disabled folks. Still sucks. Hopefully come Monday, things will be, more resolved, and I'll get back to work, which will be great. I fear the harsh lighting, or the specific lighting here is overselling the drama. This is something that every disabled person deals with. That requires, medical devices. Not every disabled person, but every person who relies on medical devices has these times where they want to be doing things, but they are limited by forces outside their control. Which I guess is just true for everybody. But it feels particularly, to me, it feels particularly acute because medical devices that I pay for out of pocket because we live in a broken society. And it just feels bad to have spent so much money to a company that is profiting off of mine and many other people's disability. And sure, you could say, well, they're also making the devices you need to live, which is true. But, it feels like there could be a better way of procuring and manufacturing these things that doesn't require a little bit to get skimmed off the top for some rich guy, That feels kind of particularly bad. On a snowbound, moonlit night, the mind echoes the same clarity and purity. With a tranquil and mild spring breeze, feelings are softened and melt on their own. Nature and man's mind blend and mix with no margin between. How do we feel about that? That there's no margin between the human experience and the forces of nature? It feels kind of trivially true, only because I think I've thought about this a lot. I imagine a fair amount of people would not agree that it's trivially true. Now, I put nature in quotation marks because I don't really like the term. I feel like it implies a certain amount of consistency, of order, of teleology that I'm not willing to admit to, not willing to concede to. I don't agree with the everything happens for a purpose crowd. I think that sometimes things just happen, man. And it's up to us to do our best to come to terms with that. Too many things happen for them all to have a reason. I mean, sure, we can draw out causation when looking backwards, but that will never lead us to an end point. It never leads us to where things are going. We're just mapping out where they came from. And they're never a single reason. Things are always multi-causal. They're codependent. There's different things that all come together to create any given thing that then itself is one of many causes that create other things, and it kind of ripples out from any one perspective, from any one given event. You kind of see a fabric or a web of causation and effect, of happening and reasoning. I read a book a little while ago from the Tibetan tradition, of Buddhism. It's like Variations in Emptiness or something like that. I'll find it when I unpack at the move. It talks about how in the Buddhist metaphysics, all things are empty of eternal and fundamental essence, right? Are all just kind of, the term that we use in English is emptiness, which can feel odd at first, but that everything that exists, everything that happens, kind of the comings and goings, the ebbing and flowing, is entirely just variations in emptiness. And it's the same thing, just in different forms of emptiness, different forms of fundamental non-self, of codependent reality. And another philosopher that I really respect, that I really like, takes a crack at explaining the same thing from the Zen tradition, and he describes it as universal hospitality. This is Byung-Chul Han in his Philosophy of Zen Buddhism book. Incredible writer, just banger after banger. But the concept of universal hospitality, treating everything in your life as a guest, but not a guest in your home, more like you're an innkeeper, and everything that happens, good, bad, neutral, all of it, you want to greet with a kind smile, have a place setting ready for it, offer it food and drink, company, and a place to stay. And when it decides to leave, however long that may be, you should thank it for its presence and allow it to be on its way without sentimentality, but it's not that you shouldn't feel things, it's that you should let it go about its own business, as if they were, done with their stay. They were heading home. They were going on to the next inn. They were, leaving across the ocean, what have you. Things that come and go. And I feel like that kind of approach is something that you need to really hold on to as a maker, as a designer, as a craftsperson. But it's never, at least it wasn't articulated quite like that when I was at design school. They talk about the iterative process. You need to not be so touchy about things. You're going to get a bunch of bad ideas before you get to the good ones. Just let them go. Don't be so precious about everything. I feel like that gets at the same idea, but it does so in a way that is void of the same kind of compassion for those ideas. The iterations, the attempts, the sketches, the models, what have you, exist on their own terms and leave on their own terms. Because the concept of them having their own terms is something that's kind of alien to what is still predominantly a fairly Cartesian society. And I feel like there is this eye of the needle that could be threaded, a golden mean, if you will, that design thinking, the practice of iterative design, craft as a kind of still undefined sort of nebulous idea that I've been bouncing around in my head for 5 years now, probably longer than that, and a kind of a humanism can all come together in a particular way that isn't, humanist design, because that, I feel, has like some weird connotations that aren't properly teased out. This is really more of a kind of late night ramble, but in the process of preparing for grad school applications and hopefully graduate school, and considerations of design as a method, craft as a kind of alternative to capitalist production, I do feel like I need to document this, because I'm a notorious self-talker, always have been, always talk to myself. So talking to the camera actually was not as difficult as I thought it would be. I already kind of talked to myself as if we're two people. I don't know. This might be going off the rails, but there's also like an interesting Buddhist perspective on that. Anyhow, I spend all my time talking to myself about this, and so if I start documenting it, then maybe I can structure my ideas more, and maybe I can create a routine and pursue this aspect of craft as well as making things, and kind of live the idea that I want of the combination of making things, thinking about things, and then introducing the third pillar of doing it together with people. I don't fully know what that will be like, but that is, I guess, I'm going to say a mid-length goal that I'm going to be pursuing more of. Yeah, I think so.